This is piece 235 titled Rebellious Silence, and it comes from a whole series titled Women of Allah by this artist, Shirin Neshat. The context for this piece centers around the country Iran, right here in light green, where the artist is from. The history of Islam in the United States has not been great recently, and we go back to 1953 to a time when our CIA helped the British in the overthrow of a democratically elected prime minister of Iran. We helped overthrow him in order to put somebody who was on our side in power, and that's the Shah Pahlavi, who you can see here, and this is his wife, and here are, of course, the Kennedys. So from 1953 to 1979, Iran was our buddy. And the reason that we were interested in Iran, there are two of them. First of all, if you look at this map, you can see the oil fields and the gas fields that are in Iran. And then if you look at this map from this would be 1950, you can see all the pink is the area of the Eastern Hemisphere that is influenced by communism. And here is Iran. So the thinking was that just like Korea, just like Vietnam, this is a piece of land that we should control so that communism doesn't spread, doesn't affect this oil and access to this Persian Gulf, which was at the time, the 1950s and 1960s, our access to oil. Well, you can look back at this picture and you can see that the Shah and his wife were very Western. And in his 20-so years of office, the Shah moved to really westernize Iran. He forbade women from wearing an abaya, a covering, an Islamic covering. And the Iranians were, by 1979, kind of tired of that. And so there was a movement led by the clerics, the Muslim clerics, to overthrow the Western-influenced Shah and bring in a Muslim leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. And in 1979, they succeeded in having this revolution, and the country of Iran became a theocracy, a government ruled by a religious leader. In the process of this revolution, Iranian students in a local government or in a local university got control of the American embassy, burned American flags, and kept 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. So you can see the tensions between Iran and the United States today are pretty horrendous. And this is all of this history going back to that explains this current relationship. Well, if you look at this Iranian Revolution in 1979 that overthrew the American-backed Shah and brought in the Muslim-backed Ayatollah Khomeini, you can see that there were women involved. Look at all these women. You see this? So our artist, Shirin Neshat, was Iranian. Her dad was a doctor in Iran, and he was pretty open to Western ideas, and he could see the 1979 revolution kind of going to happen. And so in the mid-1970s, he sent his children out of Iran, and he sent his daughter Shirin to the United States. So in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution happened, she was living in California. It wasn't until she returned in 1990, so I guess it was like 19 years after she had left, she returned, and she was shocked at what had happened to the women in Iran. So this would have been the women before the Iranian Revolution, and here you can see older women before the Iranian Revolution, And then this would be Iranian Revolution, women after the Iranian Revolution. So they're all wearing the chador, which is an abaya, a form of an abaya. So this is also the women she came across in 1990 when she returned to Iran for a visit. Women were politicized or militarized. These women here are in the police force and in the army, respectively. Police force, one of the, and oh, this looks like the same picture, but shoot, I had a military picture too. Sorry. At any rate, women, military, Iranian women are in the military as well. So Neshat saw this and she started creating art when she was in Iran that shows her, wow, what happened? Questioning. And this is where we get this piece, Rebellious Silence, in this whole series, Women of Allah. So let's look at the form. This woman is clothed in a chador, and it only allows her face to show. The portrait goes just down below her chest, but we don't see the outline of her body. There is calligraphy, or Farsi is the language, written on her face, and that's done by the artist after the photograph, by the way. And so this is not like a tattoo on the woman's face. The woman is staring very poignantly forward. She has 2/3 of a rifle showing in this photograph, and the end of the rifle barrel ends at about the woman's forehead. And the rifle divides the portrait in half, so the portrait is pretty symmetrical. And there is a very plain white background. So quite the contrast, black and white here. Content is the biggest piece of this art. There are contradictions in here that make this piece very complex. There is tradition and modernity here. Modern rifle, tradition of the woman. We have East and West kind of are implied. And there's both beauty and violence at the same time. This is another piece in her set, Women of Allah. And here's another. The series had 4 symbols that the West has associated with the Muslim world. There's the veil, the gun, the text, and the gaze. So let's look at each of those things. The text. We in the West, most of us, I don't know about you, but most of us cannot read this calligraphy, which is Farsi. It is an Iranian poem, and Iranian people can read this. And so we do know, though, about the Islamic art where there was a lot of calligraphy. And so we're left here kind of wondering, what does the poem say? Is this going back to Islamic art? What is this about? And that gaze is still pretty poignant, and that veil is still there. Well, the poem is a modern poem. It's not from the Quran. It's a poem titled Allegiance with Wakefulness. And if a person who can read Farsi reads this, they will read words like, "Oh, you martyr, hold my hands with your hands cut from earthly means. Hold my hands, I am your poet. With an inflicted body, I've come to be with you, and on the promised day, we shall rise again." So this is about the role of women in the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and it's about women joining this fight to be defending Islam. So then we have the chador, the covering, the form of an abaya. And in the West, we look at women in this covering and we assume that they are very traditional Islam. They're conservative Muslims. And we think of the veil as something that suppresses women. But if you're a Muslim looking at the chador, if you're a Muslim looking at the abaya, you might think it's a protection from leering men. So you see it totally differently. And then we see the gun. And to Westerners, the gun means violence, terror. She's a Muslim extremist. Yet to an Islamic woman, it could be a sign of strength and resistance against the West. It could be defending Islam. It could mean that she's willing to give her life to Allah. Ooh. And then we have the gaze, and we speak about the male gaze in Western art a lot. And Shirin Neshat is challenging this gaze. Remember, this is excuse me, and the piece is the oh my God, I have it in the head. The Grand Odalisque, and she has this gaze, and she's showing us kind of the Muslim Islamic Middle East. Wow. We definitely have a discussion here over the gaze in this piece. Shirin Neshat has said multiple times about her art that she was only asking questions. She made this art when she was living in the underground art world of New York City, actually when she returned from her visit in 1990, and she's lived in the United States ever since, by the way. And she says, I was only asking questions. I am only asking questions at this point in my art. But for Westerners, it contains layers of meaning that challenge our stereotypes of and assumptions about Muslim women. So it's a very, very interesting, evocative piece.